CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw, coming to you as always from the CHEK News World headquarters here in Victoria. Surrey policing gets messier, if you can believe it. The CEO of the Royal BC Museum quits, and BC Hydro screws up in multiple ways. Some of the topics we'll be covering this week in BC politics. As always, the Pod Squad is here to break it down and help us make sense of it all. Jeff, Jillian, and Allie, thank you all for being here. Surrey policing. Those two words send shivers down the spine of provincial politicians, especially this NDP government. We keep talking about it. A messy situation gets messier. Mayor Brenda Locke trying to reverse the transition from RCMP to Surrey Police back to the RCMP. Well, the government tries to pressure them to stay with Surrey Police. And then in the last week, City Council votes again, this time 6-3, which is a bigger margin, to go back to the RCMP. And not only that, Mayor Locke accuses Solicitor General Mike Farnworth of being a misogynistic bully in a wild press conference that left a lot of us, I think, stunned at how personal an attack that was. So what is going on here? Why is it getting worse? And how do we fix it? Allie, with the proviso again, and you're very good about this, that you do some work with the Surrey Police Union, but that also gives you a kind of, I think, better focus on the details of this issue. How do we get out of this jam? And what should government be doing, do you think?
Well, you forgot one other issue, and that was this week, the Ethics Commissioner report came out from the City of Surrey. And they also determined that when Councillor Stutt voted the first time, way back in November, that he was actually indeed in conflict of interest. And so had that vote not happened, we would have not dealt with this headache for months and months and months afterwards, potentially, right? It is only one vote, but it was a razor thin difference when that vote came last year. So that's also been unfolding this week in a very public way. But how do we get out of this, to your question? It's a two-part solution here problem where Brenda Locke had to do one vote with the City of Surrey, but then also the Solicitor General has to review the report, which that was the precipice of the media availability earlier this week, was give me more time to send over the report, and then the Solicitor General's office demanding the report. And so it's been embarrassing for the City of Surrey, because so many municipalities all over the country are watching to see, well, can I pull this off too, to move to a municipal task force? And then here we are, just blunder after blunder after blunder.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff, it seems like there's two options here. The province can back off and just, Surrey's had another vote and whatever, they make their choice and live with it, or it can bring the hammer down, lay down the law, however you want to put it. Do you think we're heading to either one of those?
Bring down the hammer. Bring it down. Look, BC is being very aggressive in its approach of advancing, look, we should be having the Surrey Police Service because it's going to cost Surrey taxpayers a lot less money. And it's going to mean that you're not going to be poaching all kinds of police officers from small towns across British Columbia to fill this new old police force in Surrey. Here's a deep cut. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the former president of the United States, was asked after he left office about the Bay of Pigs, John F. Kennedy's disastrous attempt to invade Cuba, half-hearted attempt to invade Cuba and depose Castro, because didn't use the U.S. military. He didn't want to create those optics. Eisenhower said, if you're going to be aggressive, you need to be willing to go all the way with it. Otherwise, you risk losing, and that risk is greater than whatever reputational risk you may be trying to avoid by not going all in. So, I think it's been going on long enough. I think the province is starting to look a little bit, it's talking tough, and it's time to act tough.
So this is the NDP government's Bay of Pigs.
Those are your words, not mine.
Jillian, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it's at the point where there's just so much chaos around this. It's dragged on for so long that politically in Surrey, people just want it to end. And I think the only way to do that is to do what Jeff said and to sort of lean in. The Solicitor General has a responsibility to ensure public safety and policing for the entire province. And the biggest issue, that they've found is that there just aren't the officers to recruit back into Surrey if they revert back to the RCMP. So, the province has already invested a ton of money trying to get those staffing levels up in other communities across the province. I think, if they do, go with your first option that you suggested and kind of just back off, it creates a whole host of other problems everywhere else. And they've already, kind of leaned in quite far. They were hoping that putting a bunch of money and conditions on the table was going to be enough. It obviously wasn't, but it's pretty clear what their position is at this point. I think they have to see it through.
Yeah, they thought 150 million would be enough to make this work and flip a vote, and it didn't work. It went in the opposite direction, and now they've dug down even deeper. We don't have to go all the way around on this next question, but anyone can jump in if they want. I don't understand. I thought the government had the power to lay down the law, and I reread the Police Act this week. Full disclosure, not a lawyer, play one on TV, late night infomercials, still not a lawyer, but I read the act and I thought, yeah, province has the power here. If they don't, maybe they should change the act and to make it the first thing they do in this fall session. So A, we have an end to the Surrey drama, and B, the province is clear in the future if another municipality tries to do this and flip-flop between elections and slates and back and forth, that they can get involved. I'm not, I'm still not convinced that we need to change the law, but Mike Farnworth says he needs that. So does anyone think that should be something that happens this fall? Change the Police Act, make it clear, or is this just kind of a political will thing? Anyone can jump in.
I will jump in and I will say this is going to the courts no matter what happens. So province claim the power. I think it's in the Police Act. Again, not a lawyer, but I have looked at an awful lot of legislation dealt in public policy. Certainly seems to be there for the Solicitor General to say, I've reviewed the policing plan. I do not have confidence that there is safety in communities across the province. And I'm putting my foot down. And it's going to get fought in the courts one way or another. So do it from a strong position instead of a pleading position.
Mm-hmm. You guys agree with that? We don't have to, if we're all on the same page, we can move on, but I
agree. I just think that it's just a little bit comical that after all of this is said and done, and if it all happens, that the mayor is still the chair of the police board. So they're going to have some awkward conversations around that table.
Can I say one thing about Brenda Locke? I think the whole name calling thing is childish. There's parents on this panel. If your kids start calling people names, you send them to their room. You don't put a bank of TV cameras in front of them and beam them all over the province of British Columbia, impugning the character of another elected official. And this is what you get when you have politicians with really small mandates. 28% is what Locke got in the last election, box themselves into corners with really bad decisions. You resort to games, name calling and vilifying others because there's no actual sound public policy way to get done what you want done because you can't. So Brenda Locke, that was ridiculous. I don't know where you're getting your advice from, but maybe get it from somewhere else.
Well, we do know where she's getting her advice.
I don't know what you're talking about, Rob.
I think another example of why the slate system doesn't work that well in municipal politics. I know it's a kind of mirror of the provincial system where you run as a party and you pool your resources, but you lock people in on big issues like policing, and then you can't move them because they're worried about getting out. Although Brenda Locke did move from a slate, but it doesn't make for the best kind of ability to evolve an argument or to present new information or to argue a position because everyone's just kind of stuck in their position from where they were on the election because they're part of parties. But anyways, I'm sure we're going to talk about that again. On to another mess, from one mess to another. This time, the Royal BC Museum CEO Alicia Dubois has resigned, citing turmoil in the museum and a change in government priorities around the museum's future, coming as the tourism minister, Lana Popham, pushes to reopen the Old Town exhibit. Old Town is back next month. New Old Town has returned Is the departure of the CEO good or bad for the museum? Feels like that she was on a different page from a different time with the new Eby administration, so maybe that kind of frees things up. Jillian, what do you make of all this?
Well, I think, she was hired for a very different type of job than what it's become, to sort of lead this massive overhaul. And now that's sort of been put on the back burner. So I think, from that perspective, I think most people can relate. You get hired to do one job, it changes completely. Maybe it's not as interesting anymore, and she's got other opportunities elsewhere. So I think, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a big fire here. But I also think that, from the government's perspective, they really just want this to not be a problem for them anymore. They kind of just want it to, it's been the most heat the government's taken in 5 years has been on this issue, and they've got so many other urgent priorities. I think they just want, things to sort of return to the status quo, slow down the process, and just kind of not have this be a headache or a distraction of any kind anymore.
Yeah, I think David Eby just wants people to get over the museum, and Lana Popham, who's an MLA here in the greater Victoria region, realizes people want to go back to Old Town and wander through there. And, I'm sure the museum's also hemorrhaging money because a third of it is closed. But Allie, what do you think of this?
We talked a little bit about this before in a previous podcast, and one of our one of my observations specifically, were that we have a general issue with museums all over the country when it comes to sharing different aspects of our history, including Indigenous history, Chinese immigration history. And so this was a big opportunity for us in BC, that we had an Indigenous CEO come in and potentially change some of the controversies that were happening with the current setup of the museum. This at a time where last year, I think it was, that we in Canada got our first CEO of the Museum Association who is Indigenous. So it's a really critical time for museums all over the country. And so despite whatever reason she had to leave, I think that there's a missed opportunity here, and we're going to lose some really good talent, because she is a very impressive person with a very impressive resume. She's a lawyer. She spearheaded this major thing at CIBC, where she was formerly. She came in from another province, so she was willing to move here for this role, and we just couldn't keep her. So we're losing talent for sure.
Mm-hmm. And we're also losing sort of direction, I guess, because there was a path, right or wrong, or however the public wanted to view it. There was a path to the museum's future, and it was different, and it was about decolonizing and better telling the exhibits that are there. And now I'm not quite sure where the museum is going, especially with the replacement project, the $1 billion replacement project imploding, and government kind of backing away from that. Jeff, how does this all fit together, do you think?
Well, real quick, one, if they want to make some money, they should spend some more time showcasing the coffee they have at the museum. It's really good.
It is good coffee.
It's really good. It's probably the best coffee they have in downtown Victoria, in my view. So check it out. Two, I'm surprised it took the CEO this long to leave. It's like inviting me to a backyard party to smoke ribs and brisket, and when I get there, there's no grill, just sushi ingredients. Fine, but I'm not going to stick around for that. I'm going to go do something else, especially when, as Allie said, you have a real impressive person like this one in the role. I'm going to throw a wild card out here. The CEO before coming here was the head of something in Alberta called the Indigenous Opportunities Fund, and that was a organization that was created by Jason Kenney, not someone I'm a political fan of, but I think it was a really smart thing that he did, because this is an organization, body of government that's set up to support Indigenous business investment in a province. It seems to me it's something that British Columbia actually needs, especially on what it said on UNDRIP and the Declaration Act and all the commitments it's made. So if the museum's not the right fit, maybe you could have this individual, and I don't want to, I'm sure she's got lots of business prospects, but we could sure use one of those, an organization like she helmed in Alberta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And at some point, the museum's got to go back and and do what it has been doing all over again. And we're going to go into public consultation about the future. We're going to go into consultation about how to better tell stories. We're going to need someone like that with that experience leading the museum. But everything seemed to get tied up together with the replacement project and the old town, and people got angry and the government backed off, and the CEO and the new government just didn't match directions anymore. So we will see who wants this job and we will see where it goes. The path right now, it sounds like Tourism Minister Popham telling me this week they're going to reopen Captain George Vancouver's ship by the end of this year. So by the end of this year, we'll be back to where we were 3 years ago, and then we'll have to figure out where we're going 3 years from now, just on the eve of an election. So probably nobody's going to talk about that. But on to our next story. It seems obvious, maybe to you and to me, that BC needs more power. We're going to have more electric vehicles, more e-bikes, more heat pumps, more electricity in our natural resource projects. But up until the last couple of weeks, BC Hydro said, you know what? We have more than enough power for our future, too much power. Turns out Hydro, completely wrong, botched its 20-year electricity forecasts, and government has now had to reopen a call for small solar and wind operators to sell hydropower so you can all plug your iPhones in and run your hipster e-bikes without plunging us into a brownout. So let's go around on this, because I think a couple of questions come to mind. Does Hydro know what the heck it is doing? Like, it feels like it has a monopoly on electricity. It should know the fundamentals of how much we need, and then how much of this is NDP's climate policy being more aggressive and kind of maybe changing the dynamic of everything there. Jillian, why don't we start with you?
Well, the climate policy, like the Clean BC came out in 2019. So even still, like, Hydro should have been more on the ball. That being said, I think, government now has realized that they are not, and they're leaning in more. So that's really good. The estimates are between 1.5 and 2.5 times more power to reach our full electrification goals. I think that, in a lot of ways, this is really good news. There's been even a bunch of Indigenous-led projects that were canceled and told no that can now go ahead. There's tons more proposed, lots of really exciting opportunities in wind power, especially. So it's unfortunate that we have been moving too slowly to this point, because it takes time to get these projects through approval and to get them built. But it's really good that the government's leaning in, and that we're going to see more of these opportunities come to more communities now.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, there was a bit of a political debate about this, and not to put people to sleep with hydro policy, but in 2019, the NDP government got a report saying, you know what, these little small independent power projects, we don't really need them because they cost too much money, and we locked in all these rates and yada yada. And now we're going back with this open call to some of those same Indigenous-led type projects, a little bit different, and saying, hey, we do need you because Hydro doesn't know what it's doing. Is that a fair criticism, or is this could anyone have foreseen that this was happening, or how do we put that all together?
Okay, well, here's how I break it down, and I'm sorry I'm about to put the entire viewing and listening audience to sleep here. BC Hydro goofed, right? They got to own that. They've goofed on the forecasts, and David Eby saw that, said not good enough. We need to get a power call. We need to get the power we need. So good on him for leaning in and doing that. The issue around, I've heard people ask, well, we had a bunch of independent power projects before, then we got rid of them. Isn't this just an admission that we shouldn't have done that? For those of us who are lucky enough to be able to afford a mortgage in the province of BC, I'll put it like this. The old power contracts were like taking a fixed rate at like 30%, right? It was, and it's not a criticism of the former government. It was early on in the days of green power, and you needed to have incentives like that to get people to want to invest. Well, the market has evolved an awful lot, and wind and solar and geothermal is a lot cheaper now than it was 10 years ago. You don't need to have fixed. You can go to the market. You can get it for like at 4%, right? So there's so the savings for us is that big gap between the fixed and the market, and we're going to. So now everyone's bored. Sorry, folks at home, but it was bad contracts before. We're going to get good, more affordable contracts, and for folks at home, it means the rate you're going to pay for power is going to be much less than it would have been. And when you try and hipster e-bikes, is that what you said? Hipster e-bikes. When you plug in your hipster e-bikes, you'll be able to charge them.
Yeah. Okay.
Allie, that is, hope everyone who's trying to fall asleep while listening to this podcast, you're fast asleep.
Allie?
I've said this before. I think the NDP are masterful in spinning and manipulating their communications. And I think this is one of those examples in that what was a very shiny press release and media availability, where we talked about how we would partner with Indigenous communities and invest in economic development opportunities across the province. This was indeed covering up the fact that this is a bit of an SOS, and the fact that there was a screw up, no matter whose fault it was. So it looks nice and shiny, but what we're not seeing is the fact that the math is there. And so it's not my math, but I did some research. So UVic did this study where, in order to meet our 2040 goals of full electrification of our vehicles, we're currently based in 2015 at about 15.6 gigawatts, which is fun to say, in a baseline based on our population and economic opportunities right now. For 2040, we would have to basically double that for 37 gigawatts. And this report came out a while ago. It didn't matter that BC Hydro didn't put it out. The fact that we want to say we're going to fully electrify, we want to say that we're going to have all the e-bikes and all of the electric vehicles. Well, how are we going to power that? And so this has been a conversation for a very long time. So how are we just now tuning into this? So it's a little bit of an SOS, and please come help us.
Allie,
and if it's not going to be us,
I was hoping for you to save me there.
Gigawatts. Okay, let's
now
go
we're
around and talk about gigawatts.
What is Hugh going to think? Our fan Hugh from University Hill Secondary School in Vancouver listens to us every week. A high schooler listens to Political Cap. What's he going to think when we're talking about? I'm talking about variable rates and gigawatts.
You're the future, Hugh.
Gigawatts.
You're the future. We're going to need you to lead BC Hydro and figure this all out, Hugh, because we're leaving you a big mess. That was the whole show this week. Messes all over the place, but we appreciate the Pod Squad for cleaning the mess up, breaking it down for us, and we appreciate you watching. Make sure you come back next week for all the latest in BC politics here on Political Capital.